3D painting. 3D painting. So what about 3D painting? By the way, you can use any Photoshop painting tools to paint directly on a 3D model just as you would on a 2D layer. And also you can use selection tools to target a specific model areas or let Photoshop identify and highlight paintable areas. And the 3D menu commands lets you, by the way, clear away areas of a model to access interior or hidden portions for painting. And by the way, when painting directly on the model, you can choose which underlying texture map to apply paint to. And typically, paint is applied, by the way, to the diffuse texture map, and which gives a model materials its color properties, by the way. And also you can paint on other texture maps, such as the bump map or opacity map. And if you paint on an area of the model that lacks the type of texture map you are painting on, and texture map is automatically created, by the way. So what about 3D painting the next level? What about 3D painting the next level? And available 3D painting methods. What about available 3D painting methods? By the way, different painting methods are appropriate for different use cases. And Photoshop provides the following 3D painting methods, by the way. We have many methods here now. The first method, live 3D painting, default in Photoshop. Brush strokes made in the 3D model view or the texture view are reflected, by the way, in real time in the other view. This 3D painting method offers high performance and minimum distortion. The next method, layer projection painting. Layer projection painting is meaning that the gradient tool and filters use this painting method, by the way. The layer projection painting method involves merging a painted layer with the underlying 3D layer. And during the merge operations, Photoshop, by the way, automatically projects the paint onto the appropriate target textures. And the next method, projection painting. So what about projection painting? This method, by the way, default in Photoshop extended CS6, and projection painting is suitable for painting multiple textures simultaneously, or for painting the seam between two textures. However, in general, it's a lower performance, by the way, painting method and may result in cracks when you are painting complex 3D objects. And the next method, texture painting. So what about texture painting? You can open, by the way, the 2D texture and paint it directly, like the next image now. The screenshot explains for you live 3D painting. And by the way, some tips to paint 3D models. If the model area hidden, you can temporarily cut away surface areas that are blocking, by the way, your view, and see reveal surface to paint on. And after that, if you are painting on curved or irregular surfaces, you can get visual feedback, by the way, before you paint of which areas can best receive paint. And you have to see also identify paintable areas, and you can also set the paint fall off angle, and which controls the amount of paint applied to angled surfaces. And you have to see such the paint fall off angle. And after that, while painting textures, seems a single brush stamp applies only to one side of the seam, and you can't move the center of the brush across the seam to paint its other side, by the way. After that, if you try to paint on a texture map, type that the material doesn't contain, by the way, and Photoshop prompts you to create a map for information on map types. You have to see 3D material setting and Photoshop extended. So what about paint an object in the live 3D painting mode? Paint an object in the live 3D painting mode. We have steps. Step number 1. You should open the 3D model in the 3D model view firstly. Step number 2. Open the texture document that you want to paint. To do so, double click the name of the texture in the layers panel. Step number 3. You should select window, then select arrange, and tile to view the 3D model view and the texture document side by side. Step number 4. Using the brush tool, paint the 3D model or the texture document, and your brush strokes, by the way, your brush strokes reflect automatically in the other view. So what about switch to the projection painting mode? Switch to the projection painting mode. We have 3 steps. Step number 1, you should create or open the 3D model firstly. Step number 2, you should select 3D, then select use projection painting. And step number 3, paint your 3D model. Not here, please. Stop here and come. Come on, not here. In the master 3D document, Photoshop, by the way, uses the projection painting method by default for painting operations. So what about unwrap UVS? Unwrap UVS of a 3D model. What about unwrap UVS and of a 3D model? By the way, Photoshop provides an option to automatically unwrap UV maps for your 3D model. We have steps. Step number 1, you should open the 3D model firstly. Step number 2, you should select 3D, then select generate UVS. Step number 3, the warning when using generate UVS. By the way, all of the meshes materials textures will be flattened in is displayed. Then click OK to continue. Step number 4, in the generate UVS dialog box that appears, by the way, you have to choose the following material and unwrapping options. We have many options here now. The first option, merge materials. So what about merge materials? Merge materials is meaning that if multiple maps, for example diffuse and bump maps, exist on a single mesh, or combine them into one map. And the second option, example. What about example? Example is meaning combine 2 different diffuse maps into one diffuse map. And by the way, if you have multiple meshes, each of them will still have their own map. For example, if you have 3 separate meshes with 3 diffuse maps, by the way, you will still have 3 separate diffuse maps for each mesh. The next option, preserve appearance. What about preserve appearance? Preserve appearance is meaning on a best effort basis maintains the look of the 3D model and its textures when new UVs are generated. And if you choose to not enable this option, the current textures, by the way, are not preserved. And the next option, UV map size. What about UV map size? It's meaning that select the required size for the generated UV maps. Pixels multiply pixels. And you have the option choose 128 or 256 or 512 or 1024 or 2048 or 4096. And what about low distortion? Low distortion is meaning that keeps the texture pattern more intact and but can create more seams on the model surface, by the way. The next option, fewer seams. Fewer seams is meaning that minimizes the number of seams that appear on the model. This can produce, by the way, more stretching or bunching of the texture depending on the model. We have 2 steps in this point now, in this option. We have 2 steps only. First step, you should click OK to continue. The second option, you can view the generated UVs under the diffuse section in the layers panel. Note here, please, in this point. By the way, after generating UVs for a fuse model, the model moves from its original position. This is the expected behavior in most rigged models, and as the rigged position is different from the position of the mesh. And the model shifts, by the way, to the mesh position because the rig is removed when generating UVs for that model. And to preview any of the generated UV maps, hold the cursor over the layer item in the layers panel. To open the UV map in a separate window, you should double click that layer item. What about target a texture type for painting? Target a texture type for painting. By the way, you can target 8 different texture types for painting. 8 types for painting, yes. We have steps here now. The first step now, With your 3D model open, select open, then select 3D, then bounce on target texture, then select bounce on target texture. Step number 2. You should choose the texture type that you want to paint. Note and be careful. In 3D models having multiple textures, by the way, and only the texture that you open and start painting on is painted, like the next image and next screenshot. In this image now, you should select 3D firstly. Then from 3D select paint on target texture, and then select diffuse. This image explains for you paint a target texture type. And so what about paint in the paint in the unlit mode? Paint in the unlit mode. By the way, you can choose to print your 3D objects in the unlit mode. This mode, by the way, ignores any lighting in your skin and wraps through texture data of the appropriate type around your 3D objects. And painting in the unlit mode lets you paint without shading and with greater color accuracy. And also you should to follow these steps. We have steps. The first step, in the 3D panel, select skin. And the second step, in the properties panel, select surface. And in the third step, select unlit texture from the style pop-up menu. So what about reveal surfaces to paint on? Reveal surfaces to paint on. By the way, for more complex models with interior or hidden areas, you can hide sections, by the way, of the model for easier access to surfaces you want to paint. For example, to apply paint to the dashboard of a car model, you can temporarily cut away the roof or windshield, then zoom inside the car to get an unobstructed view. We have 2 steps. Step number 1. Should select an area firstly of the model that you want to cut away using a selection tool such as the lasso or Mercury tool. And the second step, you can choose any of the following 3D menu commands to reveal or hide areas of the model. We have options here in this step. We have many options here now. The first option, hide nearest surface. What about hide nearest surface? It's meaning that you can't hide to hide only the first layer of model polygons within the 2D selection and to quickly peel away surface of the model. You can also use this command, by the way, repeatedly while keeping the selection area active. And by the way, also when hiding surfaces, you can rotate the model if necessary to position surfaces so that they are perpendicular to your current view. The second option here now, only hide includes polygons. It's meaning that when selected the hide nearest surface command only affect polygons that are fully within the selection, by the way, and when unchecked, it hides any polygons touched by the selection, by the way. And the next option, invert visible surfaces. What about invert visible surfaces? It's meaning that makes currently visible surfaces invisible and invisible surfaces visible. So the next option, reveal all surfaces. It's meaning that makes all hidden surfaces visible again. So what about set the paint full of angle? What's the meaning of set the paint full of angle? By the way, when painting on a model, the paint full of angle controls how much paint is applied actually to a surface as it curves away from the forward facing view, and the full of angle is calculated based on a normal or straight line projecting out from the part of the model surface that faces you. For example, in a spherical model such as a soccer ball, the full half, by the way, the full half angle to the exact center of the ball as it faces you is 0 degrees, and as the surface of the ball curves away, the full half angle increases up to 90 degrees at the edges of the ball. I'm so sorry. And this image now, this screenshot explain for you now. And A as meaning I, camera angle, and B minimum angle, and C maximum angle, and D paint fade start, and E paint fade end. We have steps. Step number 1. You should choose 3D firstly, then select 3D paint full off. Step number 2. Set the minimum and maximum angle setting. And by the way, the maximum paint full off range is 0 to 90 degrees by the way. And as 0 degrees paint is only applied to the surface if it is facing directly forward and with no drop off angle. At 90 degrees by the way, paint can flow a curved surface such as a sphere to its visible edges. And at 45 degree setting, the painted by the way area is limited to the areas of the sphere that don't curve away at more than 45 degrees. That's fine. And the minimum by the way full off angles sets a range within which paint gradually face as it approaches the maximum full off angle. For example, if the maximum full off angle is 45 and the minimum full off is 30, by the way paint opacity decreases from 100 to 0% between 30 and 45 degrees of full off. That's great. So what about identify paintable areas? Identify paintable areas, what's the meaning? By the way, identify paintable areas. It may not be clear just from looking at a 3D model whether you can successfully paint on certain areas, because the model view may not provide by the way a one-to-one correspondence with the 2D texture itself, and applying paint directly to the model is different from directly painting on a 2D texture map, and what appears to be a small brush on the model may in fact be much larger in relation to the texture, depending on the resolution of the texture or how close you are to the model when applying paint. And by the way, good paintable areas are areas where you can apply paint or other adjustments to the model surface with the most consistent and predictable effect. And in other areas, by the way, paint may be undersampled or oversampled due to your angle or distance from the model surface. And you should to do one of the following. You should to choose 3D firstly, then select paintable areas, and a selection mark highlights by the way the best areas for painting on the model. And after that, in the skin section of the 3D panel, you should to choose paint mask from the preset menu, and in paint mask mode, white shows areas good for painting by the way, and blue shows areas where paint will be undersampled, and red shows areas where paint will be oversampled. And to paint on the model, you must change from the paint mask render mode to a render mode that supports painting such as solid. And by the way, the areas selected by select paintable and the paintable areas shown in paint mask mode and are virtually determined by the current paint full off setting, and higher paint full off setting increases by the way the paintable area, and lower setting decreases the paintable area. And you should to see now set the paint full off angle. Thank you so much.